Okay, so how do we classify a triangle by its angles given its sides? Well, to classify a triangle by its angles, you have three options. It could be an acute triangle, it could be right, or it could be obtuse. Okay? Now, the way to do this is to see if it's, just to use the Pythagorean theorem. So a right triangle has one right angle, and because of the Pythagorean theorem, that's going to happen when a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. Alright, so if you take the two smaller sides, square them and add them, and they equal the biggest side squared, it's definitely a right triangle. Alright, now if you think about this, let's say that c squared was less than a squared plus b squared. So it's kind of like a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but now c gets smaller. Alright, well look what happens. Notice how now that triangle is now an acute triangle. So when the legs squared added together is more than the hypotenuse, the biggest side squared, then it's acute. And let's say that c got bigger. So c squared was bigger than a squared plus b squared. Alright, so you squared the legs, you added them together, and it was less than the hypotenuse squared, or it wouldn't really be the hypotenuse, but the biggest side squared. Look at this angle, it now looks obtuse. Alright, so that's what we're going to do for these problems. So for the first one, we would square 7 and 2, and you always compare the two smaller sides to the bigger side. Alright, so is that bigger or smaller than 8 squared? Well, 7 squared is 49, and 2 squared is 4, and 8 squared is 64. So we get 53 and 64. Alright, well, that means c squared is bigger than a squared plus b squared, which means that it's not a right triangle, okay? It's a triangle where the biggest side squared is bigger than the leg squared, which means it has to be obtuse. So if the hypotenuse squared is ever bigger than the leg squared, it's obtuse.